After the Swedish government requested an explanation, President Trump clarified that he was talking about a Fox News report, not U.S. intelligence. And the Swedish government replied, well, we look forward to briefing you on our immigration plans.
Yeah, Margaret, there were several memes that were generated clearly off of that, off the president's remarks, including Sweden incident and last night in Sweden. But I want to ask you about General McMaster. He's an active duty general. Give us a sense about how that sets him apart and what significant aspect of his relationship that he will have with the president.
Well, it's not the first time that an active duty military officer has been put in the National Security Advisor role. Colin Powell was in this job when he was still in the military, and so was Brent Scrowcroft. But what is significantly different about someone who's active duty versus retired is that they're still in that chain of command, reporting to the commander-in-chief. And because of that, they don't have as much leverage, particularly to make arguments about staffing. And we know that it was picking and selecting deputies that was a source of disagreement for the person who turned down the job last week when it was offered to him, retired Vice Admiral Harward. So David Petraeus, also the former CIA head, said he didn't even want to be in the running for the job anymore and pointed out that this was a big issue for him and a big concern of his. That you really need to be able to control who's your deputy, who's in your own area for National Security Council, to be able to sit at that table across from political advisors and still know that the president is giving your word and advice more weight, or at least as much, as those who are advising him on purely political issues.
And Margaret, you also raised the fact that McMaster has been outspoken before. He's known as a master strategist. He's written a book that is still read by military commanders. What does that say about the type of leadership he's looking to offer and some of the challenges that he might face going forward?
Well, really, across the aisle, bipartisan praise for this choice as a national security advisor, because McMaster is not only one of the most celebrated battlefield commanders from the Iraq War, so strength on the battlefield, but also known as an intellectual. He's a PhD. He wrote that book you talked about there, which is literally about challenging authority and criticizing past instances, particularly in the Vietnam War, where that didn't happen, where a president wasn't given the kind of pushback he should have, in hindsight, by military advisors at the time. And as you heard in the piece that we aired, McMaster also was critical of what President Bush, the way President Bush waged that war in Iraq. Indicating that the U.S. was not prepared to go to war in the way that they were forced to fight. So that shows at least that he appreciates the job requires not only giving the president the best advice possible as his commander-in-chief, but also perhaps pushing back on the political instincts that throughout history have often been a challenge for those weighing national security versus political interests. You know, sometimes making the best decision for the country isn't the most popular one.
Yeah, that's right. And for those viewers who are interested, that book, Dereliction of Duty, was actually his dissertation that was turned into a book about the Vietnam War and the lies in that title, the lies that led to Vietnam. So if anybody's interested in picking that up, I encourage them to do so. On Monday, Margaret, the president's deputy press secretary sent word to reporters that the president gave full authority for McMaster to hire whatever staff he sees fit. So do you have any other indication how he may choose to fill his staff?
Well, my question to that would be, hire who he wants. Can he fire whomever he wants? That's not clear in terms of the lineup of folks who are already in some of these deputy positions. Do they stay or do they go? And how much of a say does a new national security advisor have? But the White House has said consistently, we've been offering any candidate the ability to pick their staff. What we know from what the president unveiled today from his Florida estate is that the person who's been serving in Michael Flynn's job since he resigned, Keith Kellogg, also a retired general, will remain on the National Security Council staff as chief of staff. So that's at least another person in the lineup. And President Trump indicated today, it was sort of curious how he teased ahead to it, to borrow a TV term, by saying John Bolton, the former ambassador, is going to serve in some capacity, but he didn't say specifically what job that is. It's an interesting change for the president, who had previously taken him out of the running for a significant position over at the State Department. So that story seems to still be developing.
And Margaret, finally, at NATO headquarters on Monday, Vice President Pence said the U.S., quote, strongly supports NATO, but that the president expects real progress among allies in stepping up defense spending. Did you get a sense, or do you have a sense, of how effective the vice president has been in reassuring foreign leaders concerned about the president, not just Vice President Pence, but Secretary Tillerson?
Right.
There have been a whole host of President Trump's cabinet members and advisors who, in some ways, have contradicted the statements the president himself has said.
Well, I think this shows you the administration, many within it at least, recognize that they need to reassure European allies. You're right, it was a full court press. This is the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Homeland Security, and then the Vice President of the United States, all in Europe at the same time, trying to make the argument that your nerves shouldn't be so rattled here, that the Trump administration will continue to support NATO and push back against Russia, and support you in our fight in the West against terrorism writ large, as NATO continues to do, as they have for 15 years on the battlefield alongside U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. The challenge there is that while these are the right words and they were received really well by European diplomats, the question will be, what kind of follow-through will you see from the president himself? Will his own rhetoric counteract that or cause issues, cause questions? That uncertainty is in messaging is something that really does cause people to question whether America will be in a leadership role in setting the global agenda. So the Obama administration was criticized for that phrase, leading from behind. Is that, again, what this administration intends to do, saying we'll support you, but we're not going to lead you? And that foreign policy and a lot of those details haven't been filled in just yet. But this was absolutely the message that the European leaders wanted to hear articulated. They just want to see the follow through. And of course, the demand from the White House is that the rest of the European members, there are only 5 states, including the U.S., that pay their full share of defense spending, 2% of GDP on their own defense, to meet those NATO targets. And they want to see more of that happening, coughing up to pay for their own defense.
All right, Margaret Brennan for us at the White House. Margaret, thank you.